and welcome to The Winning Mentality. Tom Grant is a mountain guide and extreme ski mountaineer. When people think of skiing, they think of chairlifts, mountain restaurants and pistes, and while Tom is no stranger to a beer on a sunny mountain restaurant terrace, his specialist subject is climbing up and skiing down wild and untamed mountains. Ski mountaineering takes place away from ski resorts. It's just you going up and down the mountains using your fitness and experience to keep you safe. Tom's been playing this game for over 10 years now, and in that time he's turned himself, through sheer hard work, into one of the world's best extreme skiers. He specialises in slopes so steep that they just about hold snow, where there is no margin for error. If you fall, you die. If you misjudge the avalanche conditions, you die. If you're too slow and don't get up and down the mountain by nightfall, you die. He's lost many friends to the sport, but keeps going back, and I want to know why he keeps pushing things and how he's kept himself safe. I'm also interested in his mental strength. He's known for being able to keep his head together in the most stressful of situations and executing his skills when it matters most. He does all of this away from the spotlight and for no financial gain. He has to make a living by guiding clients around the mountains and then pursue his steep skiing in his free time. There's no cheering crowds, there's no flattering articles in the newspapers, just him out there in the most dangerous environment in the world, being the best at what he does. I should at this point say that Tom and I are close friends, and we've skied and climbed a lot of mountains together. But these days we can only have a good day together if I raise my game and he lowers his. The days of us being anything like equals ended a long time ago, and in the 7 or 8 years I've known him, he's gone from basically being a keen amateur like me to essentially playing in the World Cup final. I've enjoyed watching his rise, and I'm delighted to report that he remains as down-to-earth, unaffected, and wonderfully humble as ever. As the great Heinrich Harrer once said, "True confidence is the greatest gift a man can possess. But it's not a gift that's freely granted. The blindly arrogant possess it least of all. In order to know this true confidence, it is necessary to have known oneself at the very edge of things, times when one might even have glimpsed over onto the other side." So, onto one of the finest men I know, Tom Grant. Tom, welcome to The Winning Mentality, the first ski mountaineer we've had on the podcast. And for the uninitiated, especially people that might have done some resort skiing, what is ski mountaineering and the type of ski mountaineering that you pursue?
Thanks, Charlie. It's awesome to be here with you. Ski mountaineering is a combination of skiing and mountaineering, as you might have expected. It involves climbing mountains with your skis, either through sticking skins on the bottom of the skis, which glide one way and grip the other, or through putting your skis on your backpack and hiking up, sometimes using ice axes, crampons, sometimes ropes, typically getting to places that are inaccessible without some mountaineering skill.
But these are normal skis.
Yes.
So you have normal skis that you can put a skin on the bottom and then a binding where your heel releases?
Exactly.
And this means you can go up and down the mountain. Okay, so you climb the mountain and ski down. What is the appeal of it, and how does it differ from piste skiing? I know it's a big difference, but can you try and explain how it's different to a piste skiing?
Piste skiing is, well, you're skiing on a run that has been manufactured by humans. It's been groomed. It's been made to be relatively safe. It's been smoothed by a piste machine, and there's ski patrollers who are going to be there to ensure your safety. Ski mountaineering is done in the wild mountains where there's no safety net. There's nobody there to tell you where you can or can't go. The mountains are untamed, and it's a completely different sport from skiing on piste. It can involve a high degree of adventure or risk. It doesn't have to, but you're in a wild, untamed environment.
And the goal, if you like, is to find untracked snow, interesting terrain, a big adventure.
Exactly. That's right.
And you just got back from New Zealand, and you made the first descent of the Caroline Face on Mount Cook. Tell us about that. What does it look like for a start? It's a huge face, right?
Yeah, that was a fantastic adventure, and the trip went as well as we could have hoped. The Caroline face is a 2,000 meter face. There aren't many ski wall faces bigger anywhere in the world that you'll find. From the Bergschrund to the summit, which is the Bergschrund, is at the bottom of the face where the glacier pulls away from a steeper face, measures, yeah, it's close to 2,000 meters, and it's just colossal. And it appeals to a skier. Not all skiers so a lot might disagree with me, but it appealed to us because of its potential for having a lot of good quality skiing, and it doesn't immediately look like a very good ski face, but there are because it's just the scale is so big that where it looks like a jumble of broken ice cliffs to initially, there's a lot of space to ski between these big ice cliffs.
And how did you know about the face? Had you seen it on a previous trip? How did you know you wanted to go and ski it?
So I first came across the face on an online article written by an ESPN journalist detailing what he called the 10 greatest unskied lines in the world at the time. And it was a 2010 article. And there had been some pretty high-profile skiers who tried it before. So it had an interesting history. There was this Red Bull team that went there, and they allegedly spent €1 million on the trip. There were some top U.S. ski mountaineers who went over to give it a try. And then in the autumn of 2013, my friend Andreas Frantzen and along with Magnus Kastengren, they went over and tried it, and they were a very strong team. Andreas was one of the top ski mountaineers of our time, but Magnus tragically fell to his death coming towards the face from the summit. And I knew Magnus and Andreas pretty well, so that added to the history of the face and the fact that they were the last team to try it and their fate. So it weighed on our minds a bit.
Yeah, that adds an element of psychological difficulty, doesn't it? It doesn't actually make it any harder, but it adds an element psychologically. It must make it a bit more daunting.
Yes and no. I stopped where Magnus fell and had a look and thought about him for had a moment there where it was good to reflect on it. But we knew that he made a technical mistake, and what was concerning me wasn't one of us making a technical mistake. It was the other objective hazards which are out of our control, such as large avalanches from snow or from big overhanging ice cliffs. And generally, on a route that big, those are things that will worry me. Everyone in our team was happy with our level of skiing, that we weren't going to fall on the face.
And what was it like getting to the summit of Mount Cook? I mean, it's a hard mountain to climb in its own right, let alone to ski down a 2,000 meter unskied face.
It was tough. Well, we set our alarms for midnight. It was a bit of an early start from the hut. We were out by 1 o'clock, 1 a.m. And we found that the first 300 meters of climbing had chest-deep breakable crust, which...
So you up to your chest in snow, basically?
We're up to our chest in snow, where the top layer is firm and breakable under your weight, and then underneath it's very sugary and loose.
So was it breaking every step?
Yes.
So you basically swam up the first 300 vertical meters. That doesn't sound that far, but it's in those sort of conditions, that is a lot of physical effort, especially at the start of a big day.
Yeah, it was pretty demoralizing, and we lost an hour to 2 hours in time.
From your estimated timings?
Yeah. At that point, I had doubts in my mind that we'd be successful that day, but there was never a strong reason to turn back.
So what happened after the 300 meters of chest-deep snow?
Luckily, it got better. We found ourselves on more supportable, easygoing snow, but a very exposed snow ret with huge drops either side that was knife thin on the top and required very delicate trail braking.
So this is the mountaineering side of ski mountaineering. You're on a knife edge snow ridge. I guess if you fall off either side, it would be unsurvivable. And at this stage, you haven't even put your skis on. You still got them on your back, and you're still on crampons.
Exactly. And sometimes the wind was buffeting us, and the skis were acting as sails, which was a bit unnerving.
Oh, really? The wind was strong at this stage. It wasn't a perfect day.
Not too strong, but it was pushing us around a little bit, which was kind of scary.
And what's your headspace when you're climbing the mountain? Are you just dealing with the next 10 meters, or are you in the back of your mind thinking, we might just ski the Caroline face today?
Yeah, mainly focusing on just what's ahead, but you have to you also have, and I mean, it's normal to let your mind wander, not to get carried away with a feeling that it's ever in the bag, but you want to make sure that you're making the right decisions. So it's good to think ahead based on new information. Is this, thinking ahead whether conditions will be safe or not, and constantly processing information that you're finding on the way up.
So what sort of information you take in? You look at the weather, the snow conditions.
Exactly. There had been a lot of wind and fresh snow, so I was mainly concerned about avalanches that could be triggered by a skier or climber from wind-deposited snow.
So in total, how long did it take you from the little mountain hut you stayed at to the summit of Mount Cook?
9 hours?
Okay, so after 9 hours, you get to the summit. What happens then? Decision time.
Yeah, well, at that point, we were in a fairly committed position. We all felt that actually the easiest way to get off the mountain was going to be to ski the Caroline face.
Because it was so difficult to get up. You really didn't want to go down that way.
Exactly.
So when was the decision made? How's the decision made? Put us in that situation, standing on top of the highest peak in New Zealand, maybe about to do one of the biggest unskied lines in the world. How's the conversation go?
Well, we all knew at that point that we were going to do it.
It's just unspoken?
Yeah, it was unspoken, and that's where having good partners that are on the same wavelength comes in. There doesn't need to be a lot of discussions. You know if it's right to go or not, and you know that everybody's motivated, but also is thinking the same way that you're thinking. We were lucky that it wasn't a very hot day, so even though we topped out an hour and a half later than we were hoping to, the temperatures were pretty cold, and that was very reassuring.
Because if it's hot, you get more avalanches.
Exactly, and the face is so big that we were worried about wet snow avalanches lower down.
So from the summit, can you put your skis on the summit?
You can, but we didn't because it was, well, not in the conditions we found it in, and that's where Magnus fell. But we found it in very icy conditions, so we down climbed a little bit further to a col, and from the col there was a vertical ice wall of about 100 meters. So we made 2 abseils over it.
And then you're on the face.
Yeah.
What are the first turns like? It must just be mind-blowing to be 2,000 feet off the ground about to do these crazy turns.
Wasn't so difficult for us to ski because it was steep, but not as steep as other things we've skied before, and the snow was very good. But it was definitely an intimidating place to put our skis on.
What sort of angle are we talking about here?
High 40s, just about touching 50 degrees.
So to give people an idea, a black piste in a ski resort would be what, between 20, 25 and 30?
Yeah, maybe 30, up to 35.
But 45, 50 degrees at that stage, if you fall, it's probably the end, isn't it?
Generally, you don't want to fall on terrain that's steep, and every bounce, you'd be falling many meters with every bounce.
Okay, so this is a little much for my head to process, the thought of doing this. So you start skiing. Talk us through the whole descent, because you weren't on the face that long in total, right?
We skied it in an hour and a half, which we were really happy with, because the faster you can ski a dangerous descent like that, the safer it's going to be. There were times where we were under these big ice cliffs, and we just had to minimize the time we were under them because it's unpredictable when big chunks of ice can fall off on top of you. So from where we started skiing, the upper face was beautiful and open, and we were able to ski it pretty fluidly, making nice turns. It was good compact powder snow, which is great for steep skiing. I was still happy to let Enrico go first. We were all feeling slightly nervous, and none of us had actually skied for the last 6 months, probably since last May.
And this is October.
Yeah.
So you're a bit rusty on your ski. It's quite the first turn of the ski season.
It wasn't difficult skiing for us, and that's the way it should have been. It would have been crazy to have been on a face where you're feeling like you're skiing that big a face close to your limit. The skiing was pretty straightforward, but still, if you haven't done your main sport for 5-6 months, you're not going to be on your very top A game.
So after an hour and a half, you're off the bottom of the face, skiing away. What is that moment like?
A lot of relief and exhilaration and joy that we did it. And what was really satisfying for me was that we did it with a good safety margin. And I've skied descents before where I've come off and I've skied away, and I've just thought, thank God I'm off that. That was probably a bad decision to be there, and we got away with it. And there's only so many times you get away with it. So skiing, such a big adventurous descent. It was the biggest thing any of the three of us had skied, and one of the biggest unskied lines that you can find anywhere in the world. It was just very, very satisfying to know that we skied it with what felt like a healthy safety margin, and we weren't just really sticking our necks out there, but that we did it in the best style we could have hoped for, and we found good conditions, good safe snow, the route finding we nailed, and yeah, I was very happy to be off though because it was getting pretty hot by the time we were off it.
It must just be the most extraordinary feeling to have achieved something like that. It's interesting that you said the first emotion that came into your head was relief. Is it just, I've survived?
Well, because we did it with a good safety margin, and that was what we were hoping going into it. It wasn't a feeling of just survival, but it was definitely the lower slopes were a dangerous place to be, and we were able to ski them fast, thankfully. But for sure, if we'd made one small route finding error, it could have been really bad. We could have put us in a very dangerous situation below ice cliffs and wet snow avalanches.
Because the face is so big and complex, as you mentioned, route finding is such a big part of it. How did you find a route down the face?
I first saw the face in 2015 when I went to New Zealand with a different partner, and we wanted to attempt it, and we took a lot of photos of the face and studied the photos. We didn't find what looked like a safe line at the time. 2 years later, when we were there this last October, the shape of the face actually changed. And the reason that we were able to ski it, probably at all, was because a passage had formed through these 100-meter high crumbly ice cliffs.
And that's just pot luck. That's just how the glaciers moved that year.
Yeah. And we wanted to really be sure of our line down the face. So when we flew into the hut, we had a good look from the heli and we took photos. After that, we made 2 separate trips to opposite the face and took photos of it, really had a good hard look at it, sat there for an hour, watched if there were any avalanches coming down, tried to visualize each section. Even so, when we were skiing it, there were times where it rolled over. It looked very different being on it compared to looking across at it, and we were all blown away by the scale of it.
So just to give people some sense of scale, you just said the face is so massive. The Empire State Building is, if memory serves me right, 440 meters to the absolute tip of the building. So we're talking about over 4 of the Empire State Building on top of each other.
Ah.
You must just feel tiny in the middle of that face.
We did, yeah, for sure. And luckily we had the experience between our team to be able to find a good line down it and to be able to navigate our way when we were on the face. And I think that's where a lot of mileage of steep skiing is absolutely critical for a descent like that. And between Ben and Enrico and I, we have a lot of mileage, and I was really happy to be with those guys because they've done a lot of pretty serious skiing between them, and just the amount of time you spend on skis on steep terrain allows you to really have an understanding of where to go in relation to a photo you're looking at. And it's different if you're skiing something on site compared to climbing up it, because often when we ski big lines, we climb what we ski.
So you know where you're going when you come down.
Exactly, and you know the conditions. When you ski something on site, it means that you're skiing without having climbed it, and sometimes without having had a good look at the route.
So you're finding it meter by meter almost.
Yeah, you're having to make decisions where to go as you're skiing down and from a different point of view.
And you talk then about mileage, and you've got a lot of mileage. Where did your ski journey begin?
Well, I went on a school ski trip to the Alps when I was 13, and thought it was a lot of fun. And then I entered my first race at the end of that week.
After your first week of skiing?
After my first week of skiing.
How'd you get on?
I won it.
Nice.
I've still got the medal in my room.
Have you ever done a race since?
Maybe not an official race where I got given a medal.
So you maintain a 100% winning record in ski racing?
That's right, I better never race again.
I didn't even know that about you. So after that week, were you hooked? Was this something you knew you wanted to pursue?
Not necessarily pursue, but I found it fascinating. I found the mountains so interesting. I took, I would look at the piste map in my spare time and wonder what would happen if you left the piste and went on between the trees. And then on my second week ever of skiing, me and a friend, even though we had no idea what we were doing and we could hardly ski, we just started skiing off the piste and into really deep snow and then getting stuck and hiking out. And
just generally having epics and going to places you shouldn't be.
Exactly.
And then you went to university and everything, but it seems a big leap from a couple of weeks piste skiing and some ill-advised exploration to where you are now. What was in that gap?
I was always fascinated by steep terrain and steep snowy slopes, and I found even when I just skied 3-4 weeks, I would buy ski magazines, I'd look at steep slopes, I tried to understand what professional skiers were doing, and I started skiing as much as I could when I was a teenager and late teens, on trips with family, school, and I understood it was important to build a good foundation of technique. Luckily, my parents, gave me some lessons. I was in some ski schools. I would ski with friends, and after university, I went out to do a season in the French Alps in Tignes, and I had this job working as a ski rep, which was a typical seasonaire job, getting paid nothing, living in squalor with 10 other seasonaires in a cupboard. But I got to ski every day, and I would hike around on my own all the time, skiing the steepest lines I could find, and everybody in the resort thought I was crazy.
At this stage, did you have any knowledge? Or were you, I suppose, looking back, did you just survive that one on pure luck?
A bit of both, I'd say. From spending so much time on snow, and I developed some good intuition about the snow and about the conditions that served me well. And I also was interested in it, so I read up on mountaineering techniques, on avalanches, on what snow could be safe to ski and what not. So I was definitely lucky and pretty ignorant, but I also was learning quickly by spending every day off the piste and exploring the mountains. And I convinced my granny to buy me an ABS airbag.
Just to explain to people what an airbag is. It's not like the James Bond one where he pulls it and it wraps around him and his girlfriend that people might have seen on, I think it's Tomorrow Never Dies. It's not that thing.
Is anyone making those yet?
I would buy one if they were, but I don't believe they are.
Well, it's a bag that has an air canister of compressed air in it, and when you pull a trigger, two 75-liter airbags pop out either side. There's a lot of different models now, but this was back in the earlier days of it. And the idea is that if you're in an avalanche, it will keep you on top of the snow because less dense particles will always sit on top of more dense particles. If you have huge airbags, you're going to be less dense than the snow.
But it's not foolproof, of course, and an even better way of staying safe in avalanche terrain is just not to be in an avalanche. So how did your education progress after this season finished in Tignes?
I realized that I had to go to Chamonix because there were bigger mountains there. So in the summer of '08, I went over to Cham and basically started to be an alpine climbing bum, living in the woods, finding random people to climb with. I just pitched my tent in a patch of woods and tried to climb.
Did you have an eye on ski mountaineering at this stage? Were you thinking, I need to climb so that I can go ski mountaineering, or was the climbing a pursuit in itself?
It was both. I realized that to step up my game skiing and ski more adventurous runs, I needed to become a mountaineer. I was also doing a lot of rock climbing in the UK before, and I really liked adventurous rock climbing in the UK. So it was a natural progression.
Tell us about Cham.
Well, when I first came to Cham, I'd heard a little bit about these mythical runs like the North Face of the Midi, and I was pretty blown away by the terrain. And immediately I just had a burning desire and ambition to be skiing those sort of 1,000-meter, 55-degree runs where you can't make a single mistake for the whole time you're skiing it. Cham's just like nowhere else, because straight from the cable car you step off and you're on extreme terrain right away. So the scale of the mountains and the vertical you can ski is bigger than anywhere in the Alps, and it's got a mythical history as well, being it's considered the birthplace of alpinism and steep skiing in Europe.
So when you arrived, you just thought, this is it. This is where I want to be.
After I spent the summer there, I realized I needed to find a job and find somewhere to live. Obviously not a job where I was going to work too much.
You can't live in the woods in winter, I suppose.
I did leave a stash of stuff buried in the woods and came back to it, and rats had eaten everything. But I found a chalet, and it was nice and cozy. It had a fireplace, and it was in a cold, remote part of the Chamonix Valley. But it did for my first season. And I did realize early on that Chamonix was somewhere I was going to spend either a lot of time or potentially the rest of my life.
And what's the progression? Because I kind of get you want to ski 55 degrees, which to people listening to this, skiing 55 degrees is as serious as it gets. That's pretty much as steep as what snow can stick to.
If you look at 55 degrees face on, it looks vertical. When you're skiing it, there's such a strong pull of gravity that you have to have a very specific technique not to accelerate too much and to control your speed, and you lose a lot of height with each turn. If you fall on 55 degrees, you don't really fall down the mountain, you fall off it. You're just going to bounce into oblivion.
Okay, so this is not skiing as most people will know it, but where's the progression from you're now at the stage where you're learning to alpine climb, you're probably quite a good skier after your season in teen. How do you amass enough experience to get onto those big faces that you dreamed about?
Well, my first season in Chamonix, I was hungry and I wanted to experience what it was about. And I didn't have a lot of ski partners, so some of my first steep descents were done on my own. But I was just desperate to know that if I had what it took to ski these big steep runs, and I was just really drawn to them to test myself because I wanted to find out whether I had the level to do it, what it would be like psychologically. It was just a bit of a step into the unknown. So when I skied my first extreme run, that still is a very steep run in Chamonix, that is a real benchmark for Chamonix steep runs. I remember being at the top, and it was 55 degrees at the top, and snow doesn't really stick to anything steeper than that, like Charlie said. I wasn't even sure exactly how I'd ski it or if I was able to make each turn successfully, which looking back seems like a pretty stupid position to be in now, and I would never be in a position where I wasn't sure I could make a turn, but I just had to take a step out of the unknown and push myself and see what I could do.
My mouth is going dry listening to that. I mean, the fear on that first turn must have been extraordinary. What was it like when you landed it and you suddenly thought, I've done a turn on this legendary face on 55 degrees?
Well, I thought I can't sidestep the whole route. That wouldn't be very, very sporting. I knew I had to make a turn, so I just decided to do it and see what would happen.
And what did happen? You landed it perfectly?
Luckily I did, yeah.
And then since then, you just amass more and more experience, but you are also a fanatic trainer, and that seems to serve you really well in the mountains. Talk about your training regime and how you feel that allows you to do the things you do.
I want to be able to ski the lines I want to ski and climb the mountains I want to climb with the biggest margin of safety and the most enjoyment. And for me, that means being as strong as I can be. If you're tired on a steep descent because you've climbed 1,000 meters, you're not going to be skiing your best and you're more likely to make a mistake. So to me, it really makes sense to train hard for the mountains when I'm not in the mountains. That involves a combination of running, of weight training, of CrossFit type training, of just things like doing squats and pull-ups and push-ups and body weight exercises. Some people, there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time in the mountains in Chamonix who just feel it's enough to do their sport and be in the mountains, but I want to give myself the biggest margins possible and also to do things in the best style that they can be done, or to try to progress my own level, and it's necessary to be strong for that.
And do you think that fitness really increases your safety margin and your range of options of what you can ski?
Definitely, yeah. Yep. I'd say it does. I think your experience and your psychological state are, if anything, more important on big runs, but the stronger you are, for me they go hand in hand. The stronger I am, the more confident I am psychologically, and it feeds upon itself, and I feel like I'm able to step out with more confidence to bigger runs, knowing that I'm not going to get tired.
And you just mentioned mentality there. That must be an enormous part of it, because you're, to borrow a phrase, you're betting the farm. You are betting your life on your ability to complete that turn when you're in serious ski terrain. Your mental strength, where did that come from? Is that something you think you just were naturally inclined to, or does it just come from having done enough that you just know you can do it?
Well, now it does, but at the start, I think everybody has different drives to test themselves and to whether it's to prove to yourself or to prove to others. And I'd like to think, my motivation for it was for good reasons, that I wanted to see if this was something I could do, and it was part of who I am has always been pushing myself physically and taking physical risks. And that's what I grew up doing from a young age. I always wanted to climb to the top of the highest tree. I always wanted to jump off the highest wall. I always wanted to push the limits a little bit physically each time. And that stayed with me through my teenage years and early adulthood. And I think it pushing myself physically and is part of who I am. And now, of course, when I've done a lot of steep skiing, I have a lot of confidence that I'm not going to fall. And I think it's important. Steep skiing is very dangerous, and ski mountaineering is dangerous compared to a lot of sports, at least. So for me, it's crucial that as a steep skier, I have a strong technical level where I'm not going to blow a turn on terrain where I can't afford to. So I have complete confidence in my ability to never fall. And I think that is the way it has to be. And that's my advice to aspiring steep skiers, is to get to a level where you know you're not going to fall. Because there's a lot of other things that can kill you in the mountains. And if something kills me, I don't want it to be my own technical mistake, which I don't think it will.
That's really interesting, actually, because I think a lot of people listening to this might be thinking that you have breathing techniques you do, or some method of calming yourself down, or you're just superhuman mentally. But it sounds like it's just knowing you can do it is enough for you to keep your head in the right place.
Definitely. And that comes with mileage and with having done it a lot. And sometimes when you're feeling intimidated, you can tell yourself that you've done this thousands of times before and you know how to do it. And that's where the skill becomes automatic, and you can do it no matter how scary the situation is.
Do you do any mental training? I mean, do you do exercises for your mind?
Not specifically. Sometimes I'll visualize how I want to ski a line or visualize myself skiing it. Yeah, maybe I benefit from it. I think I've heard meditation can be beneficial, and that might be interesting to try. But I don't do any specific mental exercises, although I've had my own dedicated sports psychologist. Could be interesting.
We should get someone on and do that. That would be a good interview. But obviously, the reason you need to keep your cool is it's dangerous, and risk is a big part of it. What is your approach to risk, and how do you draw the line?
My approach to risk has changed over the years, but it's something that I'm still attracted to taking risks. And taking a certain amount of risk, I think, is healthy.
Why are you attracted to risks, just out of interest? Because a lot of people go out of their way to avoid all risk. What is it about it that appeals to you? What do you think you get out of risk?
I think it's unnatural to go through life without taking physical risks. That's how it's in our DNA. We were hunters in prehistoric times. Humans have always taken risks, whether it's been in wars, in hunting. I think it's unnatural to actually avoid physical risk.
In everyday life, do you think that risk is beneficial? I know when people have a near miss, say in a car crash, maybe that night they'll tell their wife they love them, or they'll kiss their kids one more time. Do you think that taking physical risk makes you a better person and improves other areas of your life?
No, I don't think so. I think taking too much physical risk can be a very selfish thing to do, but there's no easy answer, and people who take a lot of risks for their own fulfillment often have trouble justifying to loved ones. I don't think that taking risks makes you a better person, but it makes you sometimes understand things about yourself. And if you're doing an activity that you find fulfilling, then you're going to be a happier, more confident, more fulfilled person that's going to be of more benefit to the people around them. So I think it's important to be connected to who you are. And if who you are is having adventures and taking risks, you shouldn't suppress that. As you mature and as you get more experienced at taking risks in the mountains, your approach is naturally going to change. And at first I had this need to really test myself and to see if I could do it. Then I proved to myself that I could, and that changed to now I'm more interested in still taking risks, but doing it in a more measured way and focusing on doing what I've done, but doing it better with a higher skill level and better decision making.
And what's the motivation now? You just said you wanted to prove to yourself you could do it. You've now proved you can do it. You've skied one of the biggest unskied faces in the world. What keeps you going to the gym? Keeps you steep skiing? Keeps you training? What's the end goal, if you like?
There's always so much room for improvement, and I love skiing. I just love to be on my skis and feeling that connection with the mountains and with the snow. And I feel like I can really express myself through skiing. Also, it's skiing is something that you can never really master. It's very technical. There's a lot of subtle decision making. There's a lot of subtle techniques. There's a lot of subtle judgment. It's very psychological and very physical, and it's there is there are infinite ways to improve yourself as a ski mountaineer, and I just see unlimited scope for my own progression, and I only get more motivated actually the more that I do to get better and to explore new areas and to progress myself. I think it's there's a good quote that I like, how we're all apprentices of crafts that we can never master. And I think that's very true of that's how I see skiing. I think there's a lot of value in trying to master something and having a very high skill level in something. So what I really value is really diving deep into a certain craft, and I chose skiing and steep skiing in particular to be my craft, and obtaining just a deep level of knowledge and skills in relation to that. I don't think there's as much value in life in general as necessarily dabbling in a lot of different sports or activities or whatever you choose that your craft is going to be. I think there's a lot of value in aiming for a level of mastery in that, but also knowing that you can never fully master it.
That's really interesting, actually, it's the improvement you seek. Rather, a lot of people would reach your level. I mean, I don't want to upset anyone, but you're probably Britain's best ski mountaineer. I know you're half American, half British. We'll give you to Britain for that one. But it would seem to most people that you have mastered it, and yet it's the prospect of improving that interests you.
Yeah, it's a prospect of improving because I see a lot of scope for improvement in my skiing. And it's also the prospect of doing what I want to do, but doing it with a bigger safety margin. The more time I spend in the mountains, the more my eyes have been open to the dangers and a lot of friends lost. It scares me, and I'm probably more worried about my own safety than I have been in the past. So I'd like to keep on skiing these big runs, just doing it with a bigger margin of safety, and also to be able to improve my own technique and my own decision making, my own awareness. I think it's really interesting, and it's difficult because it's such a delicate balance between your own psychology, but that's what fascinates me.
And is there a dream list? Do you have a bucket list of ski descents you want to do? What's next?
There's some steep classic descents around Chamonix I'd love to do in the right conditions that I've had my eyes on for years and haven't had the chance to do or missed that chance. Worldwide, nothing in particular, but I would really like to do more adventurous exploratory skiing in some remote ranges and use ski trips to experience different places, and the Himalayas and the Andes would be on my list for sure.
When you're looking for somewhere to ski, is that cultural side of it quite important?
It's a bonus, but I wouldn't. There's a lot of interesting places to visit from a cultural perspective that aren't good ski destinations, and there's some places that I could hike for a week to get a few bad turns in that I'd probably just rather go without my skis.
But the goal basically is keep going, but be better.
Exactly. And forward to new friendships and relationships along the way, and just keep having fun with the people that I have fun with in the mountains, because it's also, I find it really interesting, the dynamic between partners in the mountains, and I love having a good time with people in the mountains, and also, yeah, meeting new people.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring it up, but you've got a pretty devastating list of partners who aren't here anymore because of steep skiing. Do you think the day will come where you might just think this isn't worth it, or do you think that because your skill level and fitness and all the things we talked about are improving, you'll always be within your safety margin?
You can't always be within your safety margin. That's not possible. there's a lot of unexpected things, and a lot of the greatest skiers and mountaineers have died unexpectedly in easy terrain. It's hard to say. It's really made me think differently, having lost so many friends. Not all of those have been through steep skiing, but certainly enough have, and it's something that I've thought long and hard about. It's affected me a lot. Having a son now changes things, and for me, dying just simply isn't an option. But I've had to make a decision whether I want to completely change my lifestyle and my passions, and that, for me, it's not possible for me to be true to who I am and change what I do. It's not just about steep skiing, but I work as a mountain guide. I like climbing in the mountains. I like easy skiing too in the mountains. And all of these things can end up killing you. And I think you either have to make a decision, do I want to pursue this lifestyle and this career or not? And on the balance of it, I still do. And I just want to do it as smart as possible. I'm not necessarily worried about steep skiing in particular as something that could kill me, but spending a lot of time in the mountains, it's not so good for your life expectancy. But it's something that we have to accept. If it's a passion, you have to follow your passion.
A huge thanks to Tom for his time and inspiration. Sadly, Tom was skiing a few days after we recorded this interview, hit some old, heavy snow and fell over, snapping the anterior cruciate ligament in his knee. He'll need surgery and is facing a long spell on the sidelines, so we wish him well for his recovery. Cheer him up by checking out his website, tomgrant.guide, guide is Guide, and following him on Instagram for some truly spectacular photos at Tom_Grant_. We'll be back next Sunday with a very, very special guest. The word legend is overused in sport, but I can promise you that it applies to the subject of the Winning Mentality Episode 3. See you next time, and until then, share, subscribe, and comment. Thanks for listening.